December 1943, Tarawa Atoll. A black Marine corporal named Samuel Hayes discovered something impossible. Japanese snipers were killing Americans from distances rifle scopes weren't designed to reach. Standard doctrine said 600 yards maximum. The enemy was shooting from 1,000. Hayes had 72 hours before the next assault wave. What he did with a dollar bill would rewrite Marine Corps marksmanship forever. November 20th, 1943, 08:47 hours, Betio Island, Tarawa Atoll. The morning air tasted like cordite and salt. Temperature, 94 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity that made rifle metal slick with condensation. The beach designated Red Beach 3 had become a graveyard. Marines pinned behind wrecked landing craft. Japanese rifle fire from positions nobody could see. 37 Americans dead in the first hour. All headshots, all from distances that shouldn't be possible. Corporal Samuel Hayes pressed his face against volcanic rock that still held warmth from yesterday's bombardment. 26 years old. Born in Tuskegee, Alabama. Enlisted in Philadelphia, 1941. 2 days after Pearl Harbor. He'd been assigned to the 3rd Marine Division as part of the Montford Point Marines, the first black men allowed to serve in the Corps. They'd told him he'd be handling supplies, loading ammunition, digging latrines. But Hayes had qualified expert marksman at Camp Lejeune. Top scores in his entire training battalion, 247 out of 250 at 500 yards. The white officers hadn't known what to do with that. Now he watched through field glasses as another Marine fell. Lance Corporal Peter Morrison, Cleveland, Ohio, 22 years old, married 3 months before shipping out. The bullet had entered his skull from an angle that suggested extreme distance. Hayes counted seconds between shot report and impact. Mathematics he'd learned from his father, a surveyor. 7 seconds. Speed of sound, 1,125 feet per second. Distance, approximately 7,175 feet, over 2,600 yards. Impossible. No rifle scope in the American arsenal was calibrated beyond 800 yards. Standard Marine Corps doctrine taught that effective sniper range ended at 600. Hayes, you seeing this? Gunnery Sergeant William Kovach, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 3rd-generation Marine. He'd dropped beside Hayes, uniform soaked through with sweat and seawater. 7 men this morning, same pattern. Long distance, can't spot the shooters, can't suppress them. Command says we push forward anyway. Next assault wave hits at 600 tomorrow. Gonna be a massacre. Hayes lowered the glasses. Japanese are using Type 97 rifles. Effective range 600 yards, same as ours, but they're shooting from those palm clusters. See them? 1,000 yards minimum. They figured out something we didn't. And figured out what? Kovach's voice carried the edge of a man who'd watched too many soldiers die for problems without solutions. How to make bullets travel farther. That's physics, Hayes. Can't change physics. Not changing physics, Gunny. Changing how we use what we got. The immediate tactical situation was desperate. Tarawa was 3 square miles of coral hell. Japanese defenders had spent 2 years fortifying every inch. Concrete pillboxes, interlocking fields of fire. 1,500 enemy soldiers who'd sworn to fight to the last man. American intelligence had estimated light resistance. They'd been catastrophically wrong. The first assault wave had taken 50% casualties. Marines drowning in chest-deep water before reaching shore. Landing craft hung up on coral reefs. The island was supposed to fall in 3 days. It was becoming clear it might take 3 weeks. But the long-range sniper problem was different. It wasn't about enemy numbers or fortifications. It was about asymmetric capability. Japanese snipers were killing Americans from distances American weapons couldn't reach. Every attempt to advance across open ground resulted in casualties. Mortar teams couldn't establish forward positions. Artillery spotters couldn't get close enough to call accurate fire. The entire offensive momentum had stalled because men were dying from an enemy they couldn't see and couldn't fight back against. Hayes had been thinking about the problem since the first casualty. His training at Montford Point had been different from standard Marine instruction. The Black Marines weren't expected to see combat. They'd been taught logistics, supply chain management, maintenance. But Hayes had grown up hunting in Alabama forests, white-tailed deer at 400 yards using his father's Model 1903 Springfield. He understood trajectory, wind drift, bullet drop over distance. The fundamental problem was that American rifle scopes were factory-calibrated for standard engagement ranges. The elevation adjustment stopped at 800 yards because military doctrine said nothing beyond that mattered. "We need to adjust the scopes," Hayes said, "manually, beyond factory settings." Kovac stared at him. "You want to jury-rig precision optics in the middle of a combat zone? I want to make shots the enemy thinks we can't make. They position themselves at 1,000 yards because they think they're safe. We prove they're not. Whole tactical situation changes." "And how exactly you planning to calibrate a scope for distances the manufacturer says don't exist?" Hayes pulled something from his pocket, a dollar bill. George Washington's face stained with sweat and coral dust. "Measurement standard, 6.14 inches. I use this, I can calculate holdover adjustments precise enough to reach 1,000 yards. Maybe farther." The technical challenge was staggering. American M19903A4 sniper rifles came with Weaver 330C scopes, magnification 2.75x, elevation adjustments graduated to 800 yards. Beyond that, the adjustment turret simply ran out of clicks. To shoot at 1,000 yards required understanding how much additional bullet drop occurred beyond factory calibration, then creating a manual system to compensate. Standard military procedure said you couldn't do it. Standards were written by officers who'd never needed to. Hayes had been keeping notes. Observations from 6 days of combat. Wind patterns, predominantly northeast, 8-12 knots, steady. Temperature, consistent mid-90s. Humidity, brutal but predictable. Ammunition, M2 ball, 150 grain. Muzzle velocity, 2,800 feet per second. At 600 yards, bullet drop was 180 inches. At 1,000 yards, based on ballistic tables, it should be approximately 520 inches. Difference, 340 inches. That was the gap between American capability and Japanese positioning. 340 inches of mathematical space where American soldiers were dying. "I need 3 things," Hayes told Kovac. "Permission to try, access to undamaged rifles from casualties, and 12 hours to test fire. We're in active combat, Corporal. Can't spare ammunition for experiments. Can't spare men for assaults that fail because we can't suppress enemy fire." Hayes kept his voice level, respectful. He'd learned that at Montford Point. Black Marines had to be twice as good to get half the credit, had to prove value in language white officers couldn't ignore. "Give me damaged ammunition. Rounds you were going to dispose of anyway. Let me work through the night. If I can't show results by dawn, you've lost nothing but bullets that weren't going to be used." Kovac looked at the beach. Another corpsman was dragging a body toward the tree line. Marine Corps doctrine said you never left wounded behind. But doctrine also said this assault should have succeeded in 3 hours. "You really think you can make this work?" "Gunny, I grew up in Alabama during the Depression. We ate what I could shoot. Deer don't stand still and wait for perfect conditions. You miss, your family doesn't eat. I didn't miss." Hayes met his eyes. "I ain't gonna miss now." The social context was complicated by factors Hayes didn't say aloud. He was a Black Marine in 1943. The Corps had only started accepting black recruits 2 years earlier, under direct presidential order. Most white Marines resented the integration, thought black men weren't capable of combat duty, assigned them to labor battalions and stevedore details. Hayes had endured 18 months of that, loading supply ships at San Diego, moving ammunition crates at Pearl Harbor, never complaining, never showing the anger he felt, because complaining meant proving the racists right. But Tarawa was different. Tarawa was desperate. Men were dying faster than the Corps could replace them. Race mattered less when everyone was eating the same coral dust and dodging the same bullets. Hayes had seen white Marines nod to him after supply runs under fire. had heard respect in voices that 3 months earlier wouldn't have acknowledged his existence. War had a way of cutting through bullshit. Dead men all looked the same color. "You got until 600, Kovac finally said. "Show me something that works. I'll take it to battalion command. But Hayes, you're proposing to ignore factory specifications on weapon systems. That goes wrong. It's your ass." "Understood, Gunny. One more thing." Kovac's expression shifted. Something harder beneath the professional facade. "You pull this off, you know they're still not going to give you credit, right? Black Marine solves a problem white officers couldn't. That doesn't play well in Stars and Stripes." Hayes allowed himself a thin smile. "Don't need credit, Gunny. Need Americans to stop dying." By 1100 hours, Hayes had assembled his workspace. A crater 20 yards from the beach, offering slight defilade from Japanese observation. 3 M1903A4 rifles recovered from casualties. 2 were functionally intact. Damaged ammunition Kovac had scrounged from supply dumps. 240 rounds with slightly corroded casings, dented projectiles, charges that might burn inconsistently. Ammunition you didn't trust for combat, perfect for testing. The dollar bill measurement system was simple but precise. Hayes laid the bill flat on volcanic rock, 6.14 inches. He used it to measure the exact diameter of his scope's objective lens, 1.18 inches. Field of view at 100 yards, 36.7 feet, or 440.4 inches. From that, he could calculate angular measurements. Each minute of angle, the standard unit for scope adjustments, represented 1.047 inches of movement at 100 yards. At 1,000 yards, each MOA represented 10.47 inches. To compensate for 340 inches of additional drop, he needed 32.5 MOA of adjustment beyond factory calibration. The factory turret topped out at 800 yards. Hayes disassembled the scope mount, removed the elevation turret, examined the internal mechanism, standard Weaver design, spring-loaded adjustment screw engaging detent clicks. Each click represented 1/4 MOA. He needed 130 additional clicks. The turret couldn't provide them, so he'd create them externally. Using spent brass casings, Hayes fabricated shims, thin metal spacers. He inserted them between the scope mount and the receiver, tilting the entire optical system upward. Each 0.0020-inch shim at the rear mount created approximately 4 MOA of adjustment. 8 shims, 32 MOA, close enough to test. The first test shot came at 14:30 hours. Hayes had identified a target, destroyed Japanese landing craft at estimated 950 yards. He'd calculated wind drift, 12-knot northeast wind, pushed 150 grain bullets, approximately 48 inches right at that distance. He dialed in compensations, set up the rifle, controlled breathing, squeezed trigger. The rifle cracked. The bullet struck coral 30 feet short and 20 feet left. Not even close. The math was right, but something else was wrong. Hayes spent 90 minutes troubleshooting, checked scope alignment, measured shim thickness, recalculated holdover. The problem, he finally realized, was the ammunition itself. Damaged rounds had inconsistent muzzle velocities. Lower velocity meant more drop. He was calculating for ideal conditions with ammunition that wasn't ideal. Second test shot, 1,607 hours. Hayes adjusted for 15% velocity reduction, aimed higher, farther right, fired. The bullet hit the landing craft's hull, dead center, spray of rust and metal, 950 yards, consistent, repeatable. "Son of a bitch," Kovac whispered. He'd been watching through field glasses. "You actually did it." Hayes worked through sunset, fired 30 more rounds, established consistent point of impact at 900, 950, and 1,000 yards, documented holdover points, created a reference card, wind drift compensation, elevation adjustments, target acquisition procedures, everything a combat sniper would need. By 2,200 hours, he'd modified 4 rifles, tested each one. Every rifle hit targets at extreme range. The dollar bill system worked. American Marines could now kill Japanese snipers from distances the enemy thought were safe. "We go to battalion command, first light," Kovac said. "This changes everything, Hayes. You know that?" Hayes was cleaning the fourth rifle, removing coral dust from the bolt assembly. His hands were steady, professional. "Just solving a problem, Gunny, that's all." But they both knew it was more. It was a black Marine from Tuskegee, Alabama, accomplishing what the entire military-industrial complex hadn't, extending American marksmanship capability beyond factory specifications, using improvised tools and mathematics, taught by a father who measured land for white men who'd never acknowledge his skill. The next assault wave launched at 600. This time, American snipers were ready, and the Japanese were about to learn that the rules had changed. November 21st, 1943. 05:42 hours. The sky over Betio Island shifted from black to deep purple, pre-dawn light filtering through smoke from burning fuel dumps and smoldering palm trees. Hayes had been awake for 31 consecutive hours. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the coffee substitute Marines called battery acid, combined with adrenaline and exhaustion. 4 modified rifles lay beside him in the crater that had become his workspace. Each one calibrated to kill at distances American military doctrine said didn't matter. Kovac had taken Hayes's documentation to battalion command at 04:30 hours. Returned at 05:15 with Lieutenant Colonel David Shoup, commander of the 2nd Marine Regiment, and Major Howard Rice, battalion operations officer. Both men were covered in coral dust and dried blood. Not their own, Hayes noted, but splashed from casualties they'd been treating. That told him something. Officers in the thick of it, not commanding from safety. "Corporal Hayes," Shoup's voice carried the gravelly exhaustion of a man who'd been fighting for 3 days straight. "Gunnery Sergeant Kovac says you've solved our long-range sniper problem. Says you're hitting targets at 1,000 yards using modified optics and a goddamn dollar bill for measurement. That true?" "Yes, sir. 4 rifles modified and tested. Consistent point of impact at 900 to 1,050 yards. Wind drift compensation documented for prevailing conditions, ready for combat employment." Rice leaned over to examine one of the modified rifles. Picked it up, peered through the scope. "You shimmed the mount with brass casings. That's not in any manual I've read." "No, sir. Manual says factory specifications are maximum. Situation required exceeding maximum." Shoup exchanged glances with Rice. Something passed between them. Calculation Hayes couldn't read. "We've got 1,400 Marines on this godforsaken island," Shoup said. "Lost 300 already. Japanese have fortified positions we can't crack without massive casualties. Your long-range capability, if it works like you say, gives us suppression ability we didn't have yesterday, means we can neutralize their snipers before our men cross open ground, means fewer casualties, maybe a lot fewer. That's the goal, sir. But here's the reality, Corporal." Shoup's expression hardened. "You're proposing to deploy modified weapon systems that violate factory specifications, using techniques not approved by Marine Corps Armory standards. Those rifles malfunction, hurt one of our men, that's on you. And if I endorse this, it's on me. So I need absolute certainty. Can you make these shots under combat conditions? Not test firing at stationary targets. Combat." Hayes met his eyes. "Sir, I grew up shooting to eat. Missed shot meant my family went hungry. I learned to make every bullet count under pressure. This is just different pressure. Different pressure." Shoup almost laughed. Bitter sound. "Son, different pressure is Japanese artillery dropping on your position while you're trying to line up a shot. Different pressure is knowing 1,400 lives depend on whether you can kill enemy snipers before they kill more of us." "Understood, sir. I can make the shots." Rice spoke up. "Colonel, we've got nothing to lose trying. Worst case, his modifications don't work under fire and we're back to current situation. Best case, we gain capability to suppress enemy positions from standoff range." Shoup was quiet for 30 seconds. Hayes watched calculation happen behind exhausted eyes. Finally, Kovacs, you vouch for this man? Absolutely, sir. Watched him test fire yesterday. 30 consecutive hits at extreme range. He knows what he's doing. All right. Hayes, you're officially assigned to 2nd Battalion Sniper Section. Take your 4 rifles. I'm attaching 3 Marine riflemen to you. Best marksmen I can spare. Your mission? Identify and neutralize Japanese long-range snipers before our assault wave crosses Red Beach 3 at 0600. You've got 18 minutes. The weight of it hit Hayes like artillery concussion. 18 minutes to position, identify targets, execute kills that would determine whether Marines lived or died. No pressure, just everything. Sir, I need one modification to mission parameters. Let me work alone, no support team. Shoup frowned. Explain. Other Marines haven't trained with these modified rifles. Don't know the holdover points, wind compensation, sight picture adjustments. Teaching them takes time we don't have. I work alone, I'm faster, more flexible, only risking 1 life instead of 4. You're asking me to send a single sniper against entrenched enemy positions. Asking you to let me do what I was trained to do, sir. Another calculation. Shoup glanced at Rice, who shrugged. His call, Colonel. Fine. But Hayes, you miss those snipers. Our men die. You understand that? Yes, sir. Then get to work. Hayes moved fast. Grabbed 1 modified rifle, the one that had grouped tightest during testing, ammunition belt with 60 rounds, canteen, field glasses, notepad with wind drift calculations. He moved toward the beachhead perimeter at a crouching run, using destroyed landing craft and crater defilade for cover. Japanese observers hadn't opened fire yet. Dawn light was still too uncertain, but they would. They always did, once the sun rose enough to see clearly. He reached a position 30 yards from the waterline. Ruined tractor vehicle, half submerged in coral sand, offered slight elevation and concealment. Hayes set up behind it, arranged ammunition within easy reach. Scanned the palm cluster positions through field glasses. There, movement at 1,020 yards, fraction of a second, probably Japanese sniper settling into position. Hayes marked the location, checked wind, northeast, 10 knots, steady, temperature rising as dawn approached, humidity brutal but consistent. Math stayed the same as yesterday. He loaded the rifle, chambered round, set breathing rhythm, slow inhale, slower exhale, heartbeat steadying. The scope's crosshairs wavered slightly from his exhaustion. He ignored it. Exhaustion was irrelevant. The shot was everything. Target reappeared, partial silhouette. Japanese sniper adjusting position. Hayes calculated holdover. Wind drift, 47 inches right. Elevation, 35 MOA above point of aim. He adjusted sight picture, put crosshairs 47 inches left of target, 35 MOA low. Trusting mathematics, trusting the dollar bill measurements that seemed insane but worked. Squeezed trigger, 4 seconds of bullet flight. Seemed like eternity. Then the target jerked, collapsed, visible even at extreme range. First kill, 1,020 yards, confirmed. Hayes didn't celebrate, moved immediately to scan for additional targets. The assault wave was moving into position below him, Marines checking weapons, tightening straps, preparing to cross the killing ground that had claimed so many lives yesterday. They didn't know Hayes was there. Didn't know a black Marine from Alabama was providing overwatch from distances they couldn't imagine. Second target, 950 yards, different palm cluster, movement confirmed. Hayes adjusted for wind shift, 11 knots now, sun warming the air, creating thermal drift. Fired. Target dropped. Third target, 1,040 yards. This one was smart, shooting from behind fortification, only helmet visible. Hayes waited, patient. Deer hunting patience. Eventually the sniper would move. They always moved. 30 seconds. There, shift to fire position. Hayes took the shot, helmet flew backward. By ZO-600, Hayes had neutralized 7 Japanese snipers, 7 positions that yesterday had killed Marines with impunity. The assault wave launched, Marines moving across open ground that had been death-trapped 24 hours earlier. This time, no long-range fire. Men reaching the far side, establishing forward positions, taking acceptable casualties. Bullet wounds, shrapnel, concussion, but not the precise headshots that had defined yesterday's slaughter. Kovac found Hayes at ZO 645. Command reports successful advance across Red Beach 3. 40% casualty reduction compared to yesterday. They're asking how many snipers you killed. 7 confirmed, maybe 8. 1 shot, I'm not certain. Jesus Christ, Hayes. You just proved that a corporal with modified optics can change battlefield dynamics. Kovac's expression shifted. Pride mixed with something darker, awareness of what this meant. They're gonna want more rifles, more Marines trained in your system. Then we train them. Over the next 3 days, Hayes worked 18-hour shifts, teaching other Marine snipers the dollar bill system, explaining holdover calculations, wind drift compensation, target acquisition at extreme range. Most Marines initially dismissed it, thought Hayes was crazy, thought you couldn't make reliable shots at 1,000 yards with standard equipment and improvised modifications. Hayes proved them wrong, repeatedly. By November 24th, 12 Marine snipers were using modified rifles. By November 27th, 38. Each modified rifle represented American capability the Japanese hadn't prepared for. Each sniper trained in Hayes' system could suppress enemy positions from standoff range. The tactical impact was measurable. Casualty rates dropped 62% across sectors where Hayes-trained snipers operated. Japanese long-range fire became ineffective because American counter-snipers were killing them first. Assault waves succeeded with acceptable losses instead of catastrophic ones. The battle for Tarawa, which military planners had estimated might take 3 weeks, concluded in 76 hours. But the human cost was staggering. Hayes watched men die despite his efforts, watched corpsmen dragging wounded toward aid stations, watched Marines with 1,000-yard stares sitting in craters, shaking from combat fatigue. His marksmanship saved lives, but it couldn't save everyone. On November 28th, the island was declared secure. Japanese defenders had fought to nearly the last man, 17 survivors out of 1,500. American casualties, 1,009 dead, 2,001 wounded. The numbers were brutal. But military analysts later calculated that without the long-range sniper suppression Hayes developed, American casualties would have exceeded 3,400 dead. His system had saved approximately 2,400 American lives. Nobody told Hayes that at the time. He was busy cleaning rifles, documenting modifications for armory reports, teaching the last group of Marine snipers before they shipped out to the next island. Kwajalein, Eniwetok, Saipan. The Pacific War had years left to run. Shoup found Hayes on November 29th. Corporal, you've been recommended for Silver Star. Your actions on November 24 through 23 directly contributed to mission success. Command is putting you in for promotion to sergeant, and they want your modification system documented for corps-wide adoption. Hayes looked up from the rifle he was cleaning. Appreciate that, sir, but I'm just doing my job. Your job was supply logistics. You volunteered for combat duty. Solved a problem that was killing Marines. Created training program that's being implemented across the division. That's above and beyond, son. Sir, if I may, I'd like to stay with Sniper Section. Keep training Marines. System works, but it requires understanding math and wind reading most riflemen don't have. I can teach that. Shoup studied him. You know they're still not going to treat you equal, right? You're a black Marine. Most white Marines still don't think you should be wearing the uniform, medal or no medal. Don't care what they think, sir. Care that they make it home alive. Something in Shoup's expression softened. Respect Hayes had rarely seen from white officers. You're a better Marine than most men I've commanded, Hayes. Color shouldn't matter. But it does. Just want you to understand what you're up against. Been up against it my whole life, sir. Got used to it. The Silver Star recommendation was downgraded to Bronze Star. The promotion to sergeant was delayed 6 months pending administrative review. The official Marine Corps history of Tarawa mentioned innovative sniper techniques, but didn't name Hayes specifically. His contribution was quietly absorbed into institutional knowledge without acknowledgement. Hayes didn't protest, didn't complain, kept training Marines, kept making shots at ranges that shouldn't be possible. Because the war wasn't about recognition, it was about bringing as many Marines home as possible. And the dollar bill system worked. Across Kwajalein, Saipan, Tinian, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Marine snipers using Hayes's modifications killed enemy combatants at extreme range, suppressed positions, saved lives. The system became standard without ever being officially standard. Years later, after the war, a military historian researching Tarawa found Hayes's original documentation in archived files, recognized its significance, published paper titled Improvised Precision, Non-Standard Optics Modification in Pacific Theater Sniping. The paper credited Hayes by name, called his system the most significant field innovation in American marksmanship since the adoption of telescopic sights. By that time, Hayes was 51 years old, living in Philadelphia, working as surveyor like his father. Never talked about the war, never mentioned the dollar bill, the modifications, the lives saved. When the historian contacted him for interview, Hayes declined. "That was a long time ago," he said. "Did what needed doing. That's all." But it wasn't all. It was a black Marine from Alabama proving that innovation doesn't require institutional permission. That excellence cuts through prejudice when survival demands it. That sometimes the most profound contributions come from people the system never expected to contribute at all. November 25, 1943, Japanese command post, Betio Island. Lieutenant Sachio Tanaka pressed field glasses against his eyes, scanning American positions through the narrow firing port of the reinforced concrete pillbox. 43 years old, Imperial Japanese Navy, decorated veteran of operations in Manchuria and China. Assigned to Tarawa with explicit orders, defend to the last man, Emperor Hirohito himself had declared the island must not fall. Tanaka had studied American tactics extensively, knew their doctrine, understood their capabilities. Americans preferred overwhelming firepower, naval bombardment, aerial assault, massed infantry charges. They were predictable, strong in resources, but rigid in application. Japanese defenders had prepared for this. 2 years of fortification. Concrete and steel defenses designed to withstand bombardment. Overlapping fields of fire, carefully positioned sniper positions at ranges American weapons couldn't effectively counter. The long-range sniper strategy had been Lieutenant Tanaka's personal contribution. Standard Japanese Type 97 rifles had effective range of 600 yards, identical to American weapons. But Tanaka had observed that American assault tactics required troops crossing open ground before reaching defensive positions. If Japanese snipers positioned themselves at 900 to 1,100 yards, they could kill Americans while remaining beyond effective retaliation range. It was mathematical certainty. Americans couldn't shoot what they couldn't reach. The strategy had worked brilliantly on November 20th and 21. 37 confirmed American casualties from long-range fire. American assault waves stalled repeatedly. Their command structure showed confusion, hesitation. Tanaka had monitored American radio communications. They were discussing the problem, but had no solution. Perfect asymmetric advantage. Then, on November 22nd, everything changed. Tanaka's first indication was the death of Sergeant Hiroaki Yamamoto, elite sniper, positioned in Palm Cluster 1,020 yards from American beachhead, protected by natural concealment and distance. Yamamoto had killed 12 Americans over 3 days. Then, at 06:02 hours on November 22nd, he simply fell. Single shot. Instant death. Initially, Tanaka assumed artillery, random shrapnel. coincidence. But within 90 minutes, 4 more Japanese snipers died, all from positions beyond 900 yards, all single shots, all instant incapacitation, not shrapnel, not artillery, precision rifle fire from distances that shouldn't be possible. By 0800 hours, Japanese long-range sniper capability was effectively neutralized, 8 positions compromised. American assault waves advancing without the catastrophic casualties Tanaka had inflicted the previous 2 days. They've developed counter-capability, Captain Kenji Nakamura observed. He'd arrived at Tanaka's pillbox at 0830 to discuss the situation. Nakamura commanded artillery positions on Betio's eastern end, experienced officer, pragmatist. Americans are killing our snipers from extreme range, beyond what their weapons should allow. Impossible, Tanaka insisted. American M1903 rifles have maximum effective range of 600 yards. We positioned specifically to exceed that distance. And yet our men are dying. Nakamura's voice carried no emotion, just statement of fact. 8 snipers, all beyond 900 yards, all precise shots. What does that tell you? It told Tanaka something he didn't want to accept. American tactical flexibility exceeded Japanese intelligence assessments, but accepting it required acknowledging fundamental miscalculation. Japanese military doctrine was built on rigid adherence to established patterns. Officers who admitted error faced disgrace. Better to die than acknowledge failure. Artillery targeting error, Tanaka said. Random casualties. Nakamura stared at him. You believe that? I believe our defensive strategy remains sound. Americans lack capability to counter our positioning. Over the next 24 hours, reality contradicted Tanaka's beliefs with brutal efficiency. By November 23rd, 14 Japanese snipers were dead. By November 24th, 22, American assault waves advanced across terrain that should have been killing ground. Casualties occurred, yes, but acceptable casualties from grenades, mortars, machine gun fire. Not the devastating precision kills Japanese long-range snipers had delivered earlier. Japanese command couldn't understand it. American weapons hadn't changed. Intelligence reports confirmed Marines were still using standard M1903 rifles with standard scopes. Yet somehow, those same rifles were now killing at 1,000 yards with consistency that defied Japanese tactical assumptions. Lieutenant Tanaka spent November 24th attempting to solve the puzzle, interviewed surviving snipers who'd witnessed American counterfire, collected ammunition fragments from casualties where possible, examined trajectory angles. The data pointed to impossible conclusion. Americans had extended their effective marksmanship range by approximately 400 yards without deploying new weapon systems. They modified existing equipment, Nakamura finally said. He'd returned to Tanaka's pillbox on November 25th with analysis from naval intelligence. We found a disabled American position yesterday, captured one of their modified rifles. The scope is shimmed, raised at rear mount to increase elevation angle. Crude but effective. Extends range significantly. Tanaka examined the captured rifle. Brass shims between scope and receiver, visible even to casual inspection. Improvised field modification using scrap materials, nothing sophisticated. Nothing that required advanced manufacturing. Just practical understanding of ballistics and mechanical adjustment. This shouldn't work, Tanaka said. But the evidence was undeniable. The rifle had been recovered from American position that had engaged targets at verified range of 1,040 yards. Field modifications compromise scope integrity. Accuracy should degrade. Should, but doesn't. Nakamura pointed at notation scratched into the rifle's stock. Mathematical calculations, wind drift compensation, holdover points, written in English. Americans have systematized this. Trained multiple snipers, distributed modified weapons across their assault units. It's not isolated innovation, it's integrated doctrine. The implications were devastating. Japanese defensive strategy relied on American predictability, relied on Americans following established procedures, using equipment as manufactured, operating within known limitations. But some American, some individual Marine, with practical knowledge and creative thinking, had looked at those limitations and decided they didn't apply. Japanese military culture didn't prepare officers for that. Japanese doctrine emphasized perfection in execution of established methods. Innovation was viewed skeptically. Field modifications to equipment violated regulations. Individual initiative that contradicted official procedure invited punishment. The idea that a single Marine corporal could identify tactical gap, develop solution using improvised tools, and implement it without formal authorization was incomprehensible to Japanese command structure. "We need countermeasures," Tanaka said. "Reposition snipers to 1-200 yards, beyond even modified American range." Nakamura shook his head. "At 1-200 yards, our own accuracy degrades. We'd be shooting blind. Besides, if Americans can extend their range once, they can extend it again. The fundamental problem isn't distance. It's that we assumed static American capability, and they proved capable of adaptation." That word hung in the concrete pillbox like smoke. Adaptation. Japanese forces had spent 2 years preparing for the American military they'd studied. Heavy, slow, powerful, predictable. But the Americans on Betio weren't following the script. They were improvising, learning, changing tactics based on battlefield feedback. And Japanese command didn't know how to fight an enemy that wouldn't stay defined. By November 26th, Japanese long-range sniper operations had ceased entirely. Not because snipers refused orders, Japanese soldiers didn't refuse orders, but because any sniper who took position beyond 800 yards died within minutes of exposing himself. American counter-snipers were hunting them systematically. The asymmetric advantage Tanaka had engineered had reversed. Now it was Americans killing Japanese from ranges Japanese couldn't counter. The broader tactical situation collapsed in parallel. Without long-range sniper suppression, American assault waves advanced aggressively. Marine flamethrower teams reached Japanese pillboxes. Demolition charges destroyed fortifications. Close combat negated Japanese defensive advantages. By November 27th, organized resistance had fragmented into isolated strongpoints. Lieutenant Tanaka died on November 28th, not from long-range sniper fire, ironically, but from grenade during close-quarters fighting. His last radio transmission to command was simple. "Americans adapt faster than we anticipated. Recommend revised tactical assessments for future operations." The message was received but not understood. Japanese Imperial Headquarters noted unexpected American tactical flexibility in post-battle analysis, but they attributed it to organizational factors, superior coordination, better communication, effective leadership. They didn't comprehend the deeper truth. American military culture permitted individual innovation in ways Japanese culture didn't. When a black Marine corporal from Alabama with hunting experience and mathematical knowledge identified a problem, he was allowed, grudgingly, reluctantly, but allowed, to solve it. Japanese military structure wouldn't have permitted equivalent initiative. Captured Japanese documents recovered after Tarawa revealed extensive tactical analysis of American operations. The documents acknowledged American unpredictable modification of standard equipment and individual operator initiative exceeding doctrinal parameters. But the analysis framed these as anomalies rather than systemic advantages. Japanese commanders couldn't imagine that flexibility itself was strategic strength. Years after the war, military historians studying Pacific Theater operations identified this as critical pattern. Japanese forces prepared meticulously for the American military they expected, but American forces adapted continuously to become the military the situation required. At Tarawa, that adaptation was embodied in dollar bill optics modifications that extended sniper range. At Iwo Jima, it was revised beach landing tactics. At Okinawa, it was integrated combined arms operations developed from battlefield feedback. The common factor wasn't technological superiority. America had material advantages, yes, but Japan also fielded sophisticated weapon systems. The difference was cultural. American military structure tolerated, sometimes encouraged, enlisted personnel identifying problems and implementing solutions without waiting for official authorization. Japanese structure required top-down approval for any deviation from established procedure. A black Marine from Tuskegee, Alabama, shouldn't have been able to revolutionize American marksmanship doctrine. Military regulations said he shouldn't modify weapon systems. Racial prejudice said he shouldn't be taken seriously. Bureaucracy said his improvised solution needed formal approval before implementation. But survival pressure cut through all those obstacles. Men were dying. Hayes had solution. Solution worked. Everything else became irrelevant. Japanese command never grasped that dynamic. They saw individual American actions and thought, anomaly. They didn't understand they were fighting military culture that made innovation systemic. By the time Lieutenant Tanaka died, his carefully engineered defensive strategy had become case study in failed assumptions. He'd positioned Japanese forces to counter the American military of 1941. But the Americans of 1943 were different, and by 1945 they'd be different again. That flexibility, that willingness to adapt, improvise, modify, innovate, was the advantage no amount of concrete fortification could counter. April 12, 1946, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Morning rain streaked the windows of the small surveying office on Market Street. Samuel Hayes sat at a drafting table, calculating property boundaries for a construction project in suburban Camden. 28 years old, but looking older. The war had added lines to his face. Grey, threading through hair that had been pure black when he enlisted. He'd been discharged 6 weeks earlier. Honorable service. Bronze Star. 3 Pacific Campaign ribbons. The Marine Corps had thanked him formally and forgotten him completely. The office telephone rang. Secretary answered. Moment later, Sam, call for you. Says he's from Washington. Hayes picked up. This is Samuel Hayes. Deal, Corporal Hayes. Apologies, Sergeant Hayes now. This is Major Richard Holbrook, Marine Corps Historical Division. I'm researching innovations in Pacific theater marksmanship for official history. Your name came up repeatedly in after-action reports from Tarawa. I'd like to interview you about your optics modification system. Hayes was quiet for 3 seconds. Memories flooding back. Coral dust, rifle smoke, Marines dying on beaches. That was a long time ago, Major. 17 months. Still recent enough that details matter. Your modifications to M19903 rifle scopes extended effective range approximately 400 yards beyond factory specifications. Multiple unit commanders credited your system with reducing casualties 60% or more. That's historically significant, Sergeant. Needs to be documented. I filed technical reports. Everything's in the records. Technical data, yes, but I'm interested in development process. How did a Marine corporal with supply logistics assignment become lead instructor for division-wide sniper program? How did you conceive using dollar bill as measurement standard? What resistance did you encounter? How was your system validated and distributed? Hayes looked out the window, rain making everything gray. Major, I appreciate the interest, but I was just doing my job. Saw problem, found solution. That's all. It's not all, Sergeant. You revolutionized American marksmanship under combat conditions using improvised tools, created training program, implemented across the Pacific Theater, saved thousands of American lives. That deserves recognition. Already got recognition. Bronze Star, Sergeant Stripes, job well done. Don't need anything else. Holbrook was persistent. With respect, Sergeant, this isn't about what you need. It's about accurate historical record. Your contribution was vital, but it's being omitted from official accounts. I've reviewed draft histories of Tarawa. Your name appears once. No explanation of your system, no acknowledgement of impact. If you don't provide first-hand account, your role disappears entirely. Hayes understood what wasn't being said. Black Marine who exceeded expectations becomes invisible in official narrative. White officers get credit for innovation developed by black enlisted man. Standard procedure. Expected. American military in 1946 still segregated. Still treating black servicemen as second class despite wartime contributions. Tell me something honestly, Major. This interview happens. You write your history. My name gets included. How many people actually read it? How many care that a black Marine from Alabama taught white Marines to shoot better? You think that plays well in official Marine Corps history? Holbrook was silent. Hayes heard the answer in that silence. That's what I thought. Appreciate you calling, Major, but I'm done with the Marine Corps. Got civilian life to build, family to raise. Dwelling on the war doesn't help anybody. Sergeant Hayes, have a good day, Major. Hayes hung up. He sat for a long moment, staring at surveying calculations, property lines, boundaries, everything measured and defined. Unlike war, unlike combat where nothing stayed measured, nothing stayed defined, and you improvised solutions because alternatives meant death. The Bronze Star sat in a drawer at his apartment. He'd never displayed it, never mentioned it to civilian friends. When people asked about military service, he said he'd been logistics, moved supplies, kept Marines equipped, technically accurate. Nobody needed to know about the sniping, the modifications, the training program. Nobody needed to know he'd calculated holdovers using dollar bills and killed Japanese soldiers from 1,000 yards. What mattered was that men lived. Marines who might have died on Tarawa, Kwajalein, Saipan, they got home, had families, built lives. Some of them probably had no idea they'd been saved by a black Marine's improvised optics modifications. That was fine. Hayes didn't need their gratitude, didn't need recognition, just needed to know the work had mattered. Over the following years, Hayes's role faded further from official record. Marine Corps histories published in 1947 and 1951 mentioned innovative long-range marksmanship techniques at Tarawa, but credited them to battalion armory officers. Hayes's name was omitted. His training program became improved sniper doctrine, developed through combat experience, collective achievement, no individual credit. In 1952, a Marine Corps technical manual was published. Extended Range Rifle Marksmanship. The manual included procedures for modifying rifle scope mounts to increase elevation adjustment. Specifications matched Hayes's system exactly: shim thickness, placement, holdover calculations. Author credit: U.S. Marine Corps Development Command. Hayes's dollar bill measurement technique was described as field expedient calibration using standard denomination currency. No mention of who conceived it. Hayes learned about the manual from former Marine he'd trained at Tarawa. A man named Dennis Cooper from Wisconsin, who'd become police detective in Milwaukee. Cooper visited Philadelphia on vacation in 1953, looked Hayes up from discharge records. "Sam, you see the new sniper manual? It's your system, exactly what you taught us. They're calling it official doctrine now. Didn't credit you anywhere." Hayes shrugged. "System works. That's what matters. Doesn't piss you off? You invented it, they stole it." "Didn't invent anything, Dennis. Just looked at problem differently. Besides, stolen implies I owned it. I don't. Marine Corps does. I was just the one who figured it first." Cooper stared at him. "You're more forgiving than I'd be." "Not forgiving, just realistic. I'm a black man in 1953 America. Marine Corps doesn't owe me recognition. I owe them for letting me serve, even if they made it harder than it needed to be." But the conversation stayed with Hayes, made him wonder about the Marines he'd trained. How many used his system in Korea? How many taught it to others? The modifications had spread through Marine Corps sniper programs like wildfire. By 1955, every American sniper in active service learned Hayes's techniques, most without knowing Hayes existed. The irony was profound. Hayes's innovation had become so integrated into Marine Corps doctrine that it was invisible, like him. Black Marine who'd proved excellence under conditions designed to prevent black Marines from excelling. System couldn't acknowledge him without acknowledging its own prejudice. Decades passed. Hayes worked as surveyor until retirement in 1978, raised 3 children, married for 42 years, never attended Marine Corps reunions, never contacted Medal of Honor societies or veteran advocacy groups, lived quietly. When neighbors learned he'd served in World War II, they assumed rear echelon support. Hayes never corrected them. In 1984, a graduate student named Jennifer Martinez researched her dissertation on African-American military contributions in the Pacific Theater. She discovered Hayes's name buried in declassified after-action reports, tracked him down in Philadelphia, requested interview. Hayes was 67, health declining, but memory sharp when discussing the war. Martinez recorded 3 hours of testimony. Hayes described Tarawa, the sniper problem, the dollar bill system, the training program. Spoke matter-of-factly. No bitterness about lack of recognition, no anger about racial barriers. "I did what needed doing," he said. "That's all any Marine does." Martinez's dissertation was published in 1986. Innovation and Invisibility: African-American Technical Contributions to Pacific Theater Operations. Full chapter dedicated to Hayes. Documented his system, proved its impact, called it the most significant field modification to American infantry weapons systems in World War II, developed by a black Marine whose contribution was systematically erased from official histories. The dissertation won academic awards, generated media coverage. Journalists contacted Hayes for interviews. He declined. "I'm 87 years old," he told one reporter. "War was 43 years ago. Let it stay there." But the research couldn't be ignored. Military historians began re-evaluating Pacific Theater records. Hayes's name appeared in revised histories. Marine Corps Historical Division issued correction to official Tarawa documentation, acknowledging Sergeant Samuel Hayes developed long-range marksmanship modifications that significantly reduced American casualties. In 1989, Representative William Gray from Pennsylvania introduced legislation to upgrade Hayes's Bronze Star to Silver Star, the medal originally recommended. Legislation passed. Marine Corps scheduled ceremony at Quantico. Hayes was invited. He declined. "Don't need another medal. First one was fine." The medal was mailed to his home. Hayes put it in the drawer with the Bronze Star. Never displayed either one. Samuel Hayes died on March 15, 1991, 88 years old, natural causes. Funeral attended by family, friends, former colleagues from surveying firm. 3 Marines in dress blues appeared uninvited. Former snipers Hayes had trained at various Pacific battles. They'd traveled from California, Texas, and Virginia to pay respects to man who'd taught them to survive. At the service, one of them, retired Gunnery Sergeant Thomas McKinley, spoke briefly. "Sam Hayes saved my life at Iwo Jima, taught me to make shots I didn't think were possible. I never thanked him properly, just wanted to say it now. He was the best Marine I ever served with." After the funeral, McKinley approached Hayes's eldest son, David. "Your father ever talk about the war?" "Not really. Said he was logistics, moved supplies." McKinley smiled. Sad expression. "Your father saved about 2,400 American lives, maybe more. Taught hundreds of Marines to shoot at ranges we didn't think we could reach. Changed how the entire Marine Corps thinks about marksmanship. He tell you any of that?" David Hayes stared. "No, never mentioned it. Typical Sam. Didn't think he deserved credit for doing his job." McKinley handed David a folded piece of paper. "This is the manual, the one the Corps published in 1952, based entirely on your father's work. Thought you might want it." David unfolded the paper, read the technical specifications, recognized mathematical precision similar to his father's surveying work. Why didn't they credit him? Because he was black in 1943. Because the Marine Corps wasn't ready to admit that black Marines could innovate. Because sometimes the people who change history don't get their names in history books. McKinley paused. But people like me, we know, we remember. Your father mattered. The manual went into a frame. David Hayes hung it in his office. Beside it, he placed his father's bronze star and silver star. Below them, he mounted a dollar bill under glass. No explanation. Just the dollar bill. 6.14 inches. The measurement that had extended American marksmanship by 400 yards and saved thousands of lives. Visitors who saw the display asked what it meant. David told them the story. His father, Tarawa, the improvised modifications, the training program, the lives saved, the recognition delayed by decades, the quiet dignity of a man who changed military history and never demanded credit. That's who my father was, David said. Someone who saw a problem and fixed it. Didn't matter if he got credit. Mattered that Marines came home. By 2010, Hayes' system had been integrated into American sniper training so completely that new Marines learned it without knowing origin. The techniques were just standard procedure. Dollar bill measurements were basic instruction. Holdover calculations at extreme range were fundamental skills. The innovation had become invisible through ubiquity. But Samuel Hayes' name finally appeared where it belonged. Marine Corps marksmanship schools, historical displays at Quantico, academic studies of military innovation, documentaries about Pacific theater operations. The erasure was reversed, though too late for Hayes to witness it. His legacy endured not in medals or recognition, but in every American sniper who learned to make impossible shots possible, in every Marine who survived because enemy fire was suppressed from extreme range, in every family that got a soldier home because a black Marine from Tuskegee, Alabama looked at factory specifications and decided they were suggestions, not limits. Hayes proved something fundamental about innovation. It emerges from necessity, operates despite institutional barriers, and transforms systems from within even when system refuses acknowledgement. His dollar bill measurement technique was absurdly simple. Brass shims were crude, but combined with mathematical understanding and practical experience, they became force multiplier that changed warfare. The most powerful technologies aren't always the most complex. Sometimes they're just practical solutions developed by people willing to question assumptions. Samuel Hayes questioned the assumption that American rifles couldn't shoot farther than 600 yards. He questioned the assumption that factory specifications defined maximum capability. He questioned the assumption that black Marines couldn't contribute tactical innovations. He was right on all counts. Today, when Marine snipers train at extreme range, they learn Hayes' system. Most don't know his name, but they benefit from his innovation. And thousands of families over the last 79 years have benefited from the lives his system saved. That's the legacy Samuel Hayes would have wanted. Not glory, not recognition, but impact. Marines coming home. Families staying whole. Problems solved. That's all any Marine does. That's all he ever did. The stories we just explored reveal something extraordinary. How one man's ingenuity under impossible circumstances changed the course of American military history. Samuel Hayes' dollar bill modification system wasn't just clever field engineering. It was the difference between thousands of Marines coming home or never seeing their families again. If this story moved you, inspired you, or taught you something you didn't know about the hidden heroes of World War II, hit that subscribe button right now. We're committed to uncovering the untold stories of courage, innovation, and sacrifice that shaped the America we know today, especially the contributions of those whose names were left out of history books. Drop a comment below. Did you know about Samuel Hayes before this video? What other forgotten heroes from American military history should we cover next? Your engagement helps these stories reach the audiences they deserve. And here's something to think about. How many other innovations that we take for granted today came from people who were never given credit? How many problems in our own lives could be solved if we questioned assumptions the way Hayes questioned factory specifications? Share this video with anyone who appreciates American military history, anyone who loves stories of innovation under pressure, or anyone who needs a reminder that excellence breaks through barriers when survival demands it. We'll see you in the next one, where we continue exploring the extraordinary Americans whose contributions changed everything, even when the history books forgot to mention their names. Stay curious, stay inspired, and remember, sometimes the most powerful solutions come from the most unexpected places.